kind of, it's a great pleasure for me to have these judges present here, because directly or indirectly they have affected my life and my success. And I kind of like to take you through this, through the cycle of the judges and how they have affected my life. Obviously, the most important person, I think, in my mentoring has been Charlie Saffron. I remember in 2004, he came and tried to became my coach, CEO coach. And the first thing he did, he threw this big red book on my table and says, "Frank, go read this. It was good to great. Whatever you do, you have to be passionate about it, the hedgehog model, and it has to, you have to be the best at it, and it has to make money." And that's what I've been trying to tell to my question that I was asking from the last panelist was about how do you identify the value in a term that multiple people understand. Obviously, ROI is kind of hard for a financial person to understand, but financial dollar they understand very well. So Charlie was really instrumental. And then Charlie introduced me to Michael Kaufman, and I think Michael is probably well-known in industry. If you're going to do any business in a health IT with electronic health record companies, anybody in HIT, I think Michael is a perfect advisor that you want to have. He's connected to who's who, and he not only worked with me and mentored me through the process, he actually invested in my company, and he did very well, I think, as part of the investment. Yes, very, very good. Well, I mean, going from the past, there are entities that you look up to, and I think Craig Fiat is by far the one man that I look up to. Before I met Charlie, we had a seat for chair seat that actually was moved from Illinois to WashU, and I had the honor to work with Craig Fiat for several years. And then obviously he developed a Zixi system, which is by far one of the most advanced real-time data analysis point-of-care services in WashU and MedStar that was then sold to Microsoft. So it is a great honor that I asked him to come. I felt that, his experience and what he has done, it was really brings it together. And Steve told, obviously right now he's with HLM, but when we did our first deal with Epic and we really rolled out to Epic, we really needed a second channel partner to really make our company IMO to be successful. Steve was the person working with Allscripts at that time, and we were fortunate that he challenged us, and then we signed Allscripts. Right after that, we started signing every other vendors in the country, so it was a big success story. Steve then went to IBM, and then obviously, and he is now working with HLM, which is another venture funds. Well, Andrew Park, I don't know what to say about Andrew Park, because I think Andrew, when we went through our project, or actually bring an investor to my company, we went really from basically venture funds, and tried to sell the company, and then we brought the investment bankers, and then we had no professional money, and then for the first time we brought about 94 companies interested in the company. We went through interviews, and finally we went to the actual process of actually selecting the final selections. Andrew, I interacted with Andrew a lot, and I was just impressed with the vision of the private equity, the way Andrew expressed it to me, and what they will do for us. I mean, we were at this stage of our company where we had such a big responsibility, and we wanted to have a right partner that allowed our clients to take advantage of the value that they purchased from us. And at this time, we really needed a professional organizations, and how Andrew really represented Warburg Pincus to me and to my board, I think it was great, and I'm great honor to have Andrew to be part of the judges here. So I think I'll just kind of maybe go quickly, just ask a really brief questions from just brief introduction. Just maybe you can say something about yourself, and then we can start the game. The ball rolling. Andrew, start with you.
Sure. So as Frank mentioned, I have the privilege to work with IMO and Frank and the rest of the board. We're investors in IMO, and and many other healthcare tech businesses. That's the area of investing that I spearhead at Warburg. It's healthcare technology, and it's really from a technology bent. I actually sit in our technology practice and really bring about technology expertise to the healthcare world. And so I'm a technology investor by training, and I guess a budding healthcare guy, thanks to Frank. I've learned a lot from Frank about healthcare.
Craig Fiat. I'm actually still in academia. I'm still a professor at Georgetown University. I'm no longer Chief Health Strategy Officer at Microsoft Solutions. I did sell a couple of my companies to Microsoft, and I was at Microsoft for, I guess, about 6 years in that role and some other roles. And since then, I work with small startups, do some consulting, and I'm an investor in a number of small startups, mostly working in medical device fields, but also in titanium manufacturing and some other things that leverage some of the same tools and techniques that I found were necessary for success. And I think healthcare presents special challenges, but it also has all the challenges that other industries have.
John.
So I'm Charlie Safran. I've been coming to this conference since 1983. And what I think it was one of the comments, I forget which one of our panelists talked about your network. I can't tell you how important having a network here for those of you who are young and at the beginning of your careers. You just can't tell who's going to be important in your life or for your various endeavors. And so, I've known Frank for almost 3 decades through AMIA is how we met. And so if there's any, benefit to being at a conference like this, it's the networking, and you just can't tell. So value your network, make connections while you're here, and remember that they can last a lifetime.
Michael.
Well, that's an interesting comment because so in my former life, my company was the founding company of Eclipsys, and which is now part of Allscripts, and that's actually how I met Charlie because he was doing a startup at that time that we partnered with, and then Charlie was on the board of IMO and said, "Oh, maybe we can help Frank." And I think, as Frank indicated, we started working with him and figured out how to scale the business. He had great ideas, but it was like, how do we get this to scale? And obviously, we were quite successful. So it's great. I think I've been part of this since the beginning. And I think with Craig, I was on a panel, old AMIA panel, where we talked about how to commercialize the ideas, which has always been interesting to me about transitioning from academics to a real company, which in the last panel had some interesting comments.
So I'm Steve Toll. HLM is probably the oldest healthcare venture firm in the country, doing it for 36 years. I met Frank and IMO through Michael when I was at Allscripts. And we were facing this daunting task of taking 4 products, getting them ready for government mandates, and had a disastrous product upgrade that is pretty well documented, and IMO made it possible to hit some of those targets. So it was an incredible success, I think, for Allscripts and other EMR vendors. And I'm thrilled that, talk about networks. Joined HLM in July. Michael's an advisor to the firm. This is all about networks. We're a financial investor, though we try to have a strategic eye to what's going to make a difference. But we invest purely on the fundamentals. Can you get adoption? Can something actually get out into the world and get used and have an ROI? And so I'm looking forward to the pitches.
Excellent, excellent. I think, we have 3 more minutes. I think, if anybody from the audience have a question for panelists, I mean, these are the leaders here. If anybody have questions, any questions? All right. If there's no questions, we'll go ahead and let the game begin. Okay, that's the fun. I'm going to give it to Alex to run the show.
Okay, big round of applause for Frank and his judges. Really amazing people. They've done big stuff. And, the companies that come up through these challenges are getting ready to do big stuff, and they can learn from these guys. They get money from them. They get advice, and if they do well, then they also get it from. Okay, so Tony, the clicker doesn't work. So Tony Stearns actually came through our accelerator back in, what was it, 2018, and so he's been MedStarter trained before. We're happy to see him here making it to the stage as one of the finalists. So timer, are you ready? You said for 14 minutes, you only get 6. Okay, and then she's going to hold up a sign that says you have 5 minutes left, and then you have 1 minute left, and then I think it's going to quack.
I don't have
Okay, so it's going to make some sort of noise, but she'll hold up her hand, make sure, and I'll probably get the big hook and pull you off the stage. Okay, speak into the microphone, unlike me. And Liz, are you ready? Everybody say thanks to Liz for being our timer. Student informatics. Yay, Liz. Okay, ready? Go.
Hi, I'm Anthony Stearns, the founder and CEO of IRX Reminder, located in Cleveland, Ohio at the Magnet Incubator. Mental health agencies have a serious problem today in that 25 to 40% of their patients are in crisis, and it's medication not adhered patients that are the most at risk for emergency room visits, extended hospital stays, and even mortality. And this puts pressure on the staff, and we're seeing high turnover rates at mental health agencies today. And the way to solve this would be to intervene and stop the crises, but there's no remote clinical monitoring to do it in a timely fashion. And so there's a loss of revenue due to the patient in crisis and disengagement of the staff. Mental health agencies try. They follow prescription renewals, they give people pill boxes to help organize them, now pill packing today, but there's no monitoring. And so non-adherence triggers these crises, overloading case managers, and you get high turnover rates and revenue shrinkage. Our solution is to improve adherence. So we do that through supporting self-management and providing data for monitoring. We use our app and our Internet of Things pill dispenser to empower patients with a unique behavioral method, and this transfers data through our HIPAA-compliant secure system to deliver clinical monitoring data. And we can keep people in treatment and therefore increase reimbursement. We also, through the data, can add to that reimbursement through new activities. So the core is really our Internet of Things pill dispenser, and I apologize for the PC-ness of this, but we enter a dosing window, you pick it up, place it in your hand, tilt it, and the pill comes out. And so it's this dosing window that's really key, because if you take your medication in the first half of the dosing window, you don't get any alerts. So it's only when you're forgetting that you get an alert. So as you get better at taking your medications, you get fewer, more meaningful alerts, driving high adherence. And it's only when you miss that we know that and we trigger an intervention. So we call all that smart alerting, and it's study proven to drive higher adherence. And we can do remote monitoring and also remote schedule changes to help improve the window sizes. And the pod itself is pharmacy filled, and because it's always contained, we're a Class 2 device, it's safer for patients. So this is what the app looks like. We're really measuring the quality of medication taking. So you have both your on time as well as your alerted and missed. So so we can see those changes. We provide all the information, take the medication, and we provide a calendar view that helps you to see when you're missing. So all that's transferred to the staff, and we have a summary of that so you can easily look down all the patients and gather and assign an interventionist. So we've had 22 research customers, and we've moved adherence from an average reported 48% to well over 80%, even with cognitively impaired populations. And so we have 6 published articles in that area. So what's the business model for the Mental Health Services Agency? Well, a patient is worth about $5,240 to them if all the activities go. And you can get, but because patients are in crisis, that's driven down below 4,000. And the more patients in crisis, again, the more staff turnover and the lower it can go. So if you had about 4,000 patients in an agency, you'd make about $13.5 million. But with IRX Reminder, we have a whole set of extras. Med review, we keep people engaged in therapy, monitoring, monthly for reimbursement, and interventions that are justified because we know they're non-adherent. That drives medication, the worth of of those activities to 7,300. And again, that agency would now be earning 23 million, or about a 40% net increase. Now, we know that there's a lot of competition in medication adherence, but what makes us unique is the patient oversight as well as our smart alerting, and that's protected by intellectual property, and we just learned recently that our claims are now accepted and they're moving through to issuing. So let's talk about the market. Our target beachhead is 2,500 mental health agencies serving 19.2 million patients. And we push that down, look at the top agencies most likely to adopt, it's about a $346 million market. But we have a much larger market, which is the adherence market, and we focus on mental health. So we've done a lot. We've been through NIH I-Core in the last year. We've finished our technology, validated it with the University of Michigan project, and we're focused now on finding mental health agencies that will validate our beta and to finish our FDA clearance. So we're trying to grow our company to be an $81 million company serving 180,000 people in 5 years, and we have the ideal team to do that. I can talk about us more in questions. We're just in a seed for 950,000. The first task is to complete our final FDA testing, and the money here would just about cover half those tests. So that's our story. We stabilize patients, we provide data monitoring for clinical intervention, and we provide a mechanism for bringing more revenue into a mental health services agency. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Tony. So now we have 8 minutes for Q&A. You can keep using your deck for appendices, and remember, we're trying to figure out all the answers to these questions. Are they clinically beneficial? Are they feasible to grow very quickly? Are they really innovative? How fundable? If it was your money, would you give it to them? Is it scalable? Can it grow worldwide? And of course, presentation quality. So he has 8 minutes. So I know I've wasted a little of this time, so you should still have 8. It's great timing. You're right on 6 minutes. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and say this. I know you guys are like this already because it's not the first time we've done this together. Be tough. Ask the tough questions. Okay.
I just had a question about the solution.
Yeah.
The dispenser versus the kind of solution itself, the application.
Sure.
And the value of the dispenser. And you could also think about the downsides of a dispenser, right? You forget it, you don't have it with you. And so how do you make sure, what's the value first off of the disparate parts of the solution? And then, how do you make sure the things that could go wrong with the dispenser you've addressed?
So first of all, I think there's a safety issues for pill packing. If you miss a pack, there's all sorts of extra drugs lying around. With clinical, safety is one, you only dispense the right amount of drug. The second is that it's responsible for the smart alerting. So if you take it on time, you don't get an alert. But you need something that knows that the pill's been dispensed. So this is the essential element. Do you feel that question was answered?
At the end of the day, it's the kind of alert reminder that drives.
No, see, but we don't.
That may be off.
So it's not the alert reminder. What we do is we train people so that they don't get an alert. They learn that they get it in their head the way your cat shows up to get food before you're in the kitchen. So we use operant conditioning in effect. So that's how we drive adherence. Yes?
How do you deal with multiple medications?
More than one pod.
So-
I have a picture if you'd like to see that.
Yeah, let's see the picture. Oh.
So we have a box that sits nicely on your dresser or in your kitchen.
So each
Oh.
one will set off an alarm for each.
No, you don't get alarms.
But no, I'm saying if you take it, you don't get an alarm. But if you.
That's right. No, we're smart enough to group things together. So you would get one alert that there's something going on with your medication. You look at your medications, the light's on, you take it. Basically, if the light's on, you take it. So if you have bone marrow transplant, you're back home, you have 15 medications with 7 to 9 times a day, you probably get your morning, your meal ones, but then you get alerts when you're forgetting because it was 45 minutes since you took the last one. And you just look and see what pod you're taking and dispense. And we've used this, and we've driven we've taken medication rates much higher, even with our app alone.
So could you address why the buyer of this or the sponsor of this isn't the pharmaceutical company? So, for instance, I take atrastatin, which I probably forget at least once a week. If I just took it every day, that would be 14% increase in my revenue. So why did you pick mental health providers as opposed to the people who actually have all the money from these drugs?
Because of the reimbursement, and I guess I want to change the world a little bit. I've worked with people with mental health challenges, and I know that they're disconnected from the mental health. So our mission is really to bring the provider and the patient together, to empower the patient and to provide that oversight where there's a disconnect. Right now, only in the clinic is there a lot of interaction. And it's not even a true interaction, because with medication adherence, you're making up, like, whatever I did that morning is how I've done the last year. Maybe they're more honest like you, and I miss maybe 1 in 7, but you don't really know. Now you really know. Changes the nature of the discussion.
So a couple questions for you. One is clinical results in your 22 research sites. What were those again?
We typically see somewhere in the 80s with medication adherence.
But did you do any work around the economic impact of that change?
No, because we don't have. They're all research studies with selected patients, not integrated into a full healthcare. Well, as soon as I get my phase 2 SBIRs, we'll have those numbers for you.
And then second question is, beyond mental health, are you looking at other?
Yeah, we've worked in oncology and heart failure, in stroke recovery. I have papers in those areas.
You know, I like the idea of this because in mental health in particular, I mean, look, I have trouble managing my meds and remembering, you know, in the evening whether I took my morning dose or not of my blood pressure meds. But with mental health patients in particular, that first dose that they miss is the critical one, because after they miss that one, they don't want to take the next one.
That's right.
And they then will game the system, for example. So I think potentially you may have something that's very powerful here. You mentioned something about patents. You have patents, it said claims accepted. Do you mean you have a patent issued?
No, we're right at that. So we've gone through office action, we've negotiated the claims, and we lost a set of claims, like owning, you know, pharmacy.
Your examiner has accepted
Accepted
some
our
of your
claims,
claims, so
yes.
that means your patent will grant
Yes, that's where we are.
no more barriers. So it's as
That's
good
correct.
as a granted patent. Because, you know, lots
guess-
of these can be in prosecution for years.
I understand.
Okay.
And what's the core
and
piece
what-
of your patent?
The core is around moving the medication out, detecting it, and then stopping the alert.
Okay. You know, we've seen lots of
It's a general utility patent.
we've seen a lot of medication dispensing, sensing, alerting, alert that you didn't fill your prescription. I think the pharmacies are doing a pretty good job of getting paid to send you pills even if you don't take them now. But they figured that one out. But what's to stop me from going into competition with you now that you've shown that it works? Because I'm confident whatever your IP is, we can find some way around it.
Well, I think the demonstration is that there have been 1,000 attempts, and that engineers don't understand this unique bit of behavior. And they keep thinking they need an alarm. Is there an alarm? Would you put an alarm here?
You're thinking that your ecosystem and the way you work is in some way unique,
No,
but my question is, if it's not adequately protected, how will you compete with me? Or how will you?
Well, the first thing I want to do is get patent insurance so I can fight. I'm best able to fight the patents above and beyond my means. I guess, well, I don't know. I guess if Apple comes out, they'll Sherlock me like they do everybody else. So, but I believe that a big buyer, pharmaceutical, I mean, we've been in conversations with people like Genoa Pharmacy, now an Optum division, who've shown interest in what we're doing. We've talked to Philips. They've shown an interest in what we're doing. They want us to get farther. And everybody's very enamored by pill packing right now, but it's still killing 125,000 people a year because there's all these pills lying around.
How long does the charge last? And What about refilling?
So we have an inductive charge, so it's basically off the charger for a few seconds while you're taking it, but it's designed to last over a week. It's a lithium-ion battery in here. Refills are done by the pharmacy. In our mind, it's just in time, but for the patients that we've utilized, for instance, in oncology, they come into the clinic every 2 weeks. They bring their pod with them, and their pod is filled while they're meeting with their healthcare team, and then they take it back home.
Great. Big round of applause for Tony Stearns. Tony, he did one of my favorite things when he brought his product and he showed it. So great. Timer, 6 minutes, go.
Hi everyone, my name is Elnaz. I'm CEO and co-founder at MedAux. Let me tell you a little background of why we started MedAux company. My husband is a surgeon, and the problem that most of the surgeons have is that they don't know how their patients are doing outside of the hospital. There is this lack of communication, this blackout period between patient and provider's visit, that when patient is outside of the hospital, there is no way to communicate with them. And this lack of communication leads to insufficient data, which is the main source of misallocating healthcare spend, and it is more than $100 billion problem. So MedAux is an intelligent technology that automates patient and provider communications from the time that patient is scheduled for surgery, throughout the surgery process, and post-discharge. And now let me walk you through the details of the problem that we are solving. Patient instructions are a combination of rushed verbal conversations and printed materials that cause patients to show up to procedures unprepared if they show up at all. Every year, there are 161 million surgeries performed in US, and it is estimated that above 11 million of cases are canceled because of poor patient preparation. That costs more than $24 billion problem. Cost of cancellation varies per specialty, ranging from $1,400 per colonoscopy cancellation to $6,000 per bariatric cancel case. So what this means, in an average size clinic, they do around 15,000 colonoscopies every year. And this data is actually coming from one of our customers. With 12% cancellation, and every time it happens, it's a $1,400 loss for the practice. So this clinic is losing more than $2.5 million just because of poor patient preparation. So MedAux integrates to the hospital's clinical workflow, or EMR, and interacts with patients through automated text message, navigates them at different steps of care while provides real-time clinical data. So in practical sense, when patients are registered for surgery, they receive a series of precisely timed, bite-sized instructions directly through text message with a link to additional web application. Content of text messages are short videos, surveys, and reminders that help patients prepare and be on track for their surgery. So we reach out to the patients through text message at the right time with the content that is relevant to them. For example, 5 days before surgery, patients get a text message to stop taking blood thinner or watch an instructional video. We also follow up with patients after surgery by asking short questions on their recovery process. These are clinical questions that provide actionable data at the right time. And the collected data, the patient-generated data, is structured and color-coded and returned back to the healthcare team. So when the patient needs to go to higher level of care, the care team gets an email notification to reach out to that specific patient, knowing the exact needs of the patient. So in our trial with more than 500 patients, we have 96% patient engagement. We reduced late cancellation and no-show 64%. We reduced poor patient preparation 44%, and we have 9.6 out of 10 patient satisfaction. And as a result of these outcomes, we were able to recover around $700,000 annual loss. And also in our trial in vascular surgery, we reduced readmission 26% by reaching out to the patients at the right time. We were able to intervene in the process before patients come back to the hospital with severe situation. So we are working with around 12 prestigious organizations. We are working with Fox Chase Cancer Center, which is one of the largest cancer centers in the state. We are active with them in urology. We are working with New York Bariatric, which is a group of 12 clinics in New York State. And at the same time, we are working with UCI, Urology, and OBGYN department. And also, we are working with Blue Cross Blue Shields of Louisiana to capture social determinant of health. And at the same time, we are active in more clinics and medical centers. So our value proposition for hospitals is not only reducing late cancellation and no-shows, but at the same time reducing readmission, standardizing, documenting, and improving compliance, providing long-term follow-up planning, and at the same time increasing patient satisfaction. And the data that is captured through MedAux platform is reimbursable through new CMS codes. And we know that as we become more successful, our competitors will try to replicate our success. And the way that we stay ahead of the curve and build a competitive moat is based on our continuous learning algorithms that generate proprietary data points through direct patient interactions. This means as patient-generated data enters to our system, our algorithms make risk assessment for each patient to see which one has a probability of canceling surgery or readmitting to the hospital. At the same time, our algorithms and the back end of our system is customizable to match each clinic's current protocols and marketing materials. Our competitors have a fixed set of pathways, which is the main barrier for their entrance. And considering patient engagement, failed preparation, and readmission, we have more than $24 billion total addressable market. So this is our team. My background, I'm a PhD in educational technology. My co-founder, Dr. Jazairi, is a urology resident at University of Florida, and our technical founder, Ali Alavi, is a PhD in computer science. And this is some of the customer testimonials currently using our system, so you can just read it. Thank you very much.
I'm a little bit clamped. I mean, she's come so far. That is very moving to me. So judges, you don't have to be nice to her, okay? But, so please, ask your hard questions. 8 minutes.
You mentioned competitive moat, which is a concept that I like a great deal, because you need it. But it seems as if the basis for your competitive moat is your use of AI. And I'd like to ask you, what do you mean by AI? Because it's 2 little letters, but it means everything, you know?
That's a great question. So basically, you know better than me that AI builds on retrospective data, on the previous data. So what differentiates us is that our algorithms are making risk assessment as patient-generated data enters to our system. For example, we ask patients, do you have nausea, do you have vomiting? And then based on the response that the patient is providing, the algorithms are making the prediction that if this patient needs to go to higher level of care, if the care team needs to be notified.
So I understand that's how you use the sort of the decision-making system, but what is it that you're referring to as AI? You say algorithms. Is this some sort of a classifier system that grades people into levels of risk based on inferences from the data that you have? Is it using neural networks? Is it using multiple regression? What is the technology that you're calling AI?
So we don't call it as an AI in the fact of kind of technology that is built up on the previous data. It is, as you mentioned, some algorithms, some predefined modules that, based on the data that the patient is giving, they navigate the patient through the right pathway. So we basically design the pathways with the needs of the hospitals, and then based on that, the patient goes to, which pathway they need to go.
So it's a rule-based system.
We can call it that, yes. Sure.
So, nice presentation.
Thank you.
It seems that this would work really well in a for-profit surgery center where they're not in a hospital and their goal is to run a factory essentially of procedures. In the hospital environment, my observation is that it's hard to integrate into a workflow, and just saying it integrates into an EHR doesn't really do anything for you because the docs don't even want to use their EHRs. So I was just wondering if from a marketing point of view, where your efforts have been and what the feedback has been from hospitals as opposed to for-profit surgery centers, if you've been in those.
That's a good question. So basically, when it comes to the EMR integration, right now we are in Epic App Store and at the same time Cerner of one of the hospitals that we are working. And what we see that if you consider the limited time and the limited number of providers, we are actually leveraging their care capacity. And this technology is actually reaching out and scaling to meet the unmet needs of the patients, not just for surgery, but at the same time chronic care management, medication adherence, pain management, social determinant of health. And we have phenomenal feedback from large organizations, and specifically from the people such as case managers, the nurses who are in real contact with the patients. They say that this system is reducing their workflow, the calls that are getting from the patients, because basically they know that the patients are on track. They don't need to call to see how the patient is doing before and after, a visit. And they just get the notification. It can be inside the EMR or through an email that they need to reach out to that specific patient.
And who are you selling to in the institution primarily? Who are you calling on?
So we are working with, considering the trial, we had a trial with Johns Hopkins, but selling is UCI. We are active in their two departments, OBGYN and at the same time urology. And at the same time, we are working with Fox Chase Cancer Center, which is one of the largest centers in Europe.
So you're going to the managers of the individual departments? That's what I'm asking you. You're going to
So
a CIO, CFO?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
It takes a village to sell, healthcare kind of technology. So we start with the chairman of the department. That's the first person that we get in contact. And then the whole process of compliancy, IT, all the regulations that needs to go through a technology before they give us access. And, the first step that we do is that we do a trial so that they can have the results with their own patient population. And for the trial, we see that the hospitals are not comfortable to let us go in through the EMR. And that's why we provide the system for the trial of 3 months as a standalone solution. And the only information required to enter to the system is patient's cell phone and surgery date. And then the whole system starts working.
And your pricing model?
So we have a SaaS business model coupled with service offering. We are providing in $10,000 per department, and this includes adding a limited number of patients and at the same time having a limited number of programs. But basically right now we are early stage revenue, and we provided our system on early adopter price, which was $5,000.
So I do think the competitive mode is a key question here
Sure.
for you guys. And I get the data and the AI. Can you speak a little bit about the content and kind of care pathways and how you guys kind of cater that so that you get such better results than anyone out there, including the EMR? I mean, you can presumably see EMRs getting into the space themselves. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So we see that, again, one of our competitive advantages is that we can customize the platform. And the reason is that we are not a chatbot. We always emphasize that don't consider us a chatbot. These are the modules that we have developed as the back end of the system. So we get the instructions that right now the clinics are given to the patients. We design the program, and it takes around 4 to 5 days for our team to work with the case managers to customize the program, not only based on the protocols, but at the same time marketing materials, so that after that they start the trial, they see the feedback of the patients, and this is an ongoing process. So for example, 6 months after they enroll the program, if they want, they can customize the program again. We have templates right now for each procedure that we start, but again, every institute is different, and they want to have the program based on their needs of the clinic and their population.
So what were the areas that you have content for now that someone can purchase?
So yes, we can give the content to them, but we haven't seen so far any institute that wants to have our content. They always say that, so you have the general template, but for example, they provide us with the videos from their own staff and their own providers, because they want to increase the loyalty of the patients. When they are watching the videos that are coming from the staff, it increases the connection between the patient and the surgeons.
And do you see yourselves competing with both the AMIA solutions and the Mitonomies of the world, but also the Impulse mobiles around patient engagement? Because it feels like you're doing both.
So our direct competitors are not Mytonomy. They are in the sector of patient education, but what we do based on the clinical questions that we are asking, they are indirect competitors. For us, the direct competitors are Medumu and Conversa Health. So they're all in the same area of patient education is crowded, but what we are doing, each of us are, basically capturing different type of instructions and patient engagement.
Big round of applause for Elnaz. Elnaz. Okay, it's always beautiful to see entrepreneurs growing, changing, improving, listening, answering the tough questions and the good questions. So if everybody will take a moment and okay. Judges are still working. So Scott, you actually have a little time while the judges are finishing their scoring. So tell us where you're from, your hometown. Come on over here.
Yep. So I'm Scott Levin. I'm the founder.
This is not part of his time, so you can't talk about your product
Okay.
at all.
Okay.
Just
so
tell us about you.
I'm from this area. I actually live in Capitol Hill, DC, and I'm a faculty member at Hopkins and co-founded this company.
Ah, very
Yep.
cool. In Hopkins.
Yep.
So which department are you in?
I'm a actually trained biomedical engineer, but I'm an associate professor in emergency medicine, so the School of Medicine at Hopkins.
Very cool. Okay, I think we got one more judge still working. You good? Okay. So is everybody out there, you guys ready? Okay. Liz, are you ready? Okay, take it away. You got 6 minutes.
Thank you. Emergency departments in this country are in crisis, the crisis of emergency department crowding. And everybody knows that's walked into an emergency department has seen this, and it's harming patients. It's financially harming the country to the tune of about $24 to $38 billion in overutilization and overspending. And there's also regulatory harms as well. The first thing that happens when any patient goes into the emergency department is the first clinical assessment is triage, where essentially the patient's information is asked about why the patient is there, and they're assigned level 1 through 5, level 1 being the sickest, level 5 being the least sick. Based on what they're assigned, their pathway through the emergency department is very different and biases all the decisions after that point. Right now in this country, the EDs are all using the Emergency Severity Index, which is a subjective algorithm that has been shown with our research and many others to be highly variable, inter-rater reliability is low, and also another characteristic of it is that if you're graded a level 1 or 2, you're a patient that's not safe to wait, you'll be brought to the back. If you're graded a level 4 or 5, you're often fast-tracked to a different care area. But if you're a level 3, there's uncertainty, and that's where the provider's kind of balking as to whether you're sick or not. So you have this system that's supposed to differentiate patients, but 70% of these patients across the country are level 3, so they call it triage. So these projected clinical course for these patients are uncertain, and they're the ones that are waiting for long periods of time, and are also ones that mix a group of sick patients with those that are potentially well and don't need to wait. So we're addressing this problem of better differentiating patients in triage using our eTriage algorithm, which when a patient comes into the ED, we use these data, which is routine across all emergency departments nationwide. Chief complaint vital signs. We have a way to scrape the patient's medical history. This all goes into a machine learning algorithm that I can talk about in detail to predict the risk of a patient's in-hospital mortality, ICU admission, emergency surgery, and hospital admission. So several different outcomes in tandem. Based on those outcomes, based on the risk of those outcomes, we recommend a triage level to the nurse. And I'll kind of show you how that exactly works. So this is the standard triage workflow across the country, and we have this in a number of EHRs. But demographics are added. Medical history, which is now around 80% of patients in most large healthcare systems will have medical history in the data before they get to the ED. The patient's chief complaint, like fatigue, nausea, and their vital signs. So this process takes about 2 minutes. What we then do is take that, run it through our algorithm, and make a recommendation. And it's very passive. And so at the end of the day, the recommendation appears. We do some interpretable machine learning where we say why it is that we're recommending a specific triage level. In our first sites that we started, we were able to actually put in placeholders for nurses to give us information about whether they agreed or didn't disagree, and we were able to take that into account and put it back into our algorithm. But they're still assigning the acuity at the end, just like they always were before. And we know that this has actually sped up their triage time in the hospitals we've deployed. So what has happened? So we started it at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and we're now in a dozen EDs. But we've improved risk stratification. So instead of 70% level 3s, it's now now anywhere between 40 to 50% level 3s. We've seen improved efficiency, so 42-minute increase or decrease in door-to-admission time for the sickest patients. We're able to conservatively translate that to $674,000 in annual savings for kind of a average to low size ED. We've also importantly been able to speed time to the ICU and to emergency surgery, where we know minutes and hours are actually linked to morbidity and mortality for these patients. We're also very much engaged with the nursing staff when we do this, and the hospitals that do this with us are able to achieve their magnet status because they're actually a part of a technology that they introduced into their hospital. So from a company standpoint, there's 5,000 EDs nationwide. About 75% of them have been polled to say they're dealing with the crisis of emergency crowding. There's 145 million visits to EDs. Pretty much everyone's getting triaged each year. And so, this has been our journey where we started with one hospital, spread it to the Hopkins Health System, and have now kind of gotten some early validation with paying customers. And so our next leap is the scale. And that's where I think we have less experience and is where we're looking for help. So the ask that we were asked to give is we've been focused on customers the whole way. This is the first time we've ever done a competition, but we're looking for non-Epic EDs and potentially non-Cerner EDs because we have links into both those systems now. We're also offering incentives to EDs that are part of larger health systems and that can help us spread. And we're interested in talking with partners that there's strategic growth opportunities with. So next for us is to scale. And that's going to be hiring more technical staff to go from our platform to what is a more enterprise level platform that we could deliver to a higher number of customers. Growth, we've done zero business development, so we want to start investing in that some. And also an FDA and IP strategy that we've been developing. So I always want to say thanks to all the folks that have funded us to this point. And also just to know that, we are a platform and we have these 5 tools and they're all generating revenue, and we're actually investing money from all those tools into the eTriage and Case-Link product. So.
All right, thank you for that fantastic presentation. Audience, remember that the grading that you're doing should also be based on the interactive Q&A. So hold off until the very end and give your accurate scores. And remember, you can talk to these guys afterwards. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience might have some great partnership opportunities. So judges, ask away.
You mentioned something about your first contact with outside customers or paying customers. Could you speak about your current revenue experiences with those customers?
Yeah, so we, across the different, I got to get the numbers exactly. Across the different products, it's around 9 different customers, 18 product deployments, and we were at around $500,000 in revenue last year. And next year, if we just do what we're doing and don't grow anymore, it would be $1 million. So that's sort of where we're at with our.
But none of that is for this particular triage.
No. So, a good proportion, a substantial proportion is for this eTriage tool. Yes.
So you have how many customers, did you say?
It's 7 or 8, depending on whether you count them if they're committed or not. But it's 7 or 8 different health systems, and then there can be different product deployments within each of those health systems.
So they're either Epic or Cerner, your customers.
Yeah.
Right.
Primarily, it's been primarily all Epic to this point. We're now working with some a couple of the other vendors too. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just wondering why you wouldn't just, why not focus on those, and then why are you looking for outside of Epic and Cerner? Why do you need to do Meditech or the other guys? What's the deal?
Well, I think because we're looking to integrate, you know, with the other systems, we have a platform to do it. We think that this is a problem that isn't just for Epic customers or Cerner customers, so that's why we would incentivize that type of, because we feel like we could learn the integration with them, and that opens up our market.
How did you train your machine learning algorithm? Where did you get your data?
Yeah, so well, first we went to the CDC, but then we train the algorithm for each individual hospital. So we have a standardized process, but we collect data, we give them queries, they give us their data, we run the algorithm. Actually, we do this all at no cost because we want to show the value before we even, and make sure it works before we bring it to them. And so we use a lasso feature selection approach to go through all the medical history. We have another feature selection approach to look at complaints. Complaint data is very important and how that interacts, and then mix that in with the vital signs. But at the end, we use a random forest model but the value is in setting that data up for the model, not really the model that fits and predicts. Yep.
How do you sell to emergency rooms? How do you sell to emergency rooms? What's your sales cycle there, and who in the emergency room do you talk to?
So the sales cycle's slow. I wish it was faster, but it depends. So our key is to identify the decision maker as quickly as possible, and it's usually at the VP level. And so sometimes it's the emergency department director, that's a physician. Sometimes it's the administrator. You have to get the nurse buy-in. So we take an approach of kind of, you know, the nurse is our end user, the administrator is the one writing the check, and the ED director is the one that kind of has to bless it all. So you can't ignore any of them, and it's different in every health system.
But as more than half of the EDs are outsourced. So have you dealt with any of the outsourcers?
Yeah, so that's one of the EDs. So there's one customer we have now that has an emergency physician outsourcing group, and so that's an interesting customer. We're paying attention to that customer a lot because there's value, so we understand
Actually,
that.
that's more important than the
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you're embedded in the workflow of the ED? So the customers that you're working with now,
Right.
you know, how critical are the insights that you're driving, and does that impact the workflow, or is it more, you know, it's they check and it's a reaffirmation of what they would have done anyway?
Well, the workflow doesn't change, but the recommendation has changed triage designations a ton, and has changed flow throughout the department a ton. So their actually workflow for that decision does not change, but you know, there's 60% more level 4s and 5s being fast-tracked at Johns Hopkins now than there was three years ago. So it does change the department.
Got it. And besides the kind of day-to-day tactical workflow, you know, if they look at kind of seasonally or over time, are you also kind of able to drive insights to the ED more strategically?
Yeah, I mean, seasonality is something we take into account, but we go to the ED director, and there's different problems with triage. One, everyone's a 3. 2, we don't have a trained nursing staff, and one nurse is saying the patient's a 4, the other is a 3. There's a lot of arguments, so the variability. Somebody else will say, I think that this is the Hopkins case, we're overutilizing. We're doing too many tests on patients that are not sick. So those are been the kind of the archetypes of people that have come to us for their particular objective, and then we'll tailor our whole pitch and the rollout around that objective. And there's not 100 objectives. It's like there's 3. Yep.
No more questions? Do we have any questions from the audience?
I have one more, and that is just to clarify something you just said. You said the value was in the work done staging the data, getting the data out and formatted in the right shape, and not so much in the predictive algorithms that you're using.
Yeah,
And you feel that that's a defensible position to be in the marketplace?
We have patents on this, but we know that effort to procure and that data in a way is so large that I think a company that wants to do this would probably spend a lot, would buy us instead of doing it themselves. We think there's not a ton of people focused on the ED. I mean, there's some here. We're from emergency medicine. I'm from the emergency department, and so that's another, I think, factor that we see is that bringing solutions from other places into the ED tends to not work. So these are just some of the fences we put up.
And how are you pricing?
It's different with each hospital. I guess I probably feel more comfortable.
You got size issues and
It's based on volume. It's a SaaS, and it's based on implementation needs. So some places say, nope, we want to run with this. We implement it. We already know how. And others say we need help. And so it's based on that. Beyond that, it's volume.
Okay, so we have time for one question from the audience.
Yeah, I have one question. Very, very first thing you said was that when you go to emergency room, they rate you on a 1 to 5. 1 to 2 means 1 to 2 means we got to get this person right away, and then 4 to 5 there's no rush, and then you said 3, 70% is a 3, which is sort of right in the middle, which is where there's a problem. They don't know what to do. And my question is, with all due respect, I listened to the whole rest of this. I don't quite follow. What is your product? How are you helping that? What are you doing to help that process?
Yeah, so the level 3s, there's less of them. We're differentiating, pulling out the sick patients that were level 3s, making them level 1s and 2s because they can benefit.
How are you pulling them out?
Because the triage recommendation, they're not a 3 anymore. They're a 4 or 5, or I'm in somebody else's slides. They're not a 3 anymore. They're a level 1 or a 2 or a 4 or 5.
Because you're evaluating them.
I gotta hang on. Guys, Jeff, great questions. And this is one of the things we really love to see is the interaction between potential investors.
Khan. I'm founder and CEO of Inference Analytics. Ian is a platform that has been designed to focus on medical language with the goal of improving physician productivity and reducing errors in care delivery. Anyone who visits a physician will have the same experience that I've always had, that whenever you go to a doctor, the physician is more focused on actually entering information than actually administering care. And the question I always ask is, where is all this information going? Right? There's about 1 billion radiology reports written, 100 million pathology reports, 35 million discharge notes, 5 billion SOAP notes. And the question is, okay, who's reading that information and actually who's reacting to it? And what I find is that very often, this information is often not read, it's hard to write, and results in physician burnout. So with that as a focus, we've created a platform that addresses the following key areas, right? It is a deep learning platform that understands language to the extent that it can understand notes and reports just like a physician would. It can generate its own notes and impressions just like a physician would. And it reduces the burden of writing on important diagnosis and important documentation on the physician. So I'm going to let Dr. Utku Pamaksu, who's my co-founder, talk a little bit about the platform that we call Ian.
So what Ian does is, actually before developing any algorithmic model, we wanted to create a healthcare corpus that can understand the contextual similarity in medical terms. Google did this for the regular natural language processing algorithms by training millions of Wikipedia and Google News articles, for example, to find the similarity between terms Los Angeles and San Francisco. However, that infrastructure and other NLP corpuses are not capturing medical terms as we are interested in extracting insights from. Thus, we created our own healthcare corpus by using unsupervised deep learning with training more than 25 million medical reports. By doing this, now we are able to understand the proximity between the term male and prostate instead of looking for female. Or whenever we see the terms chest pain or breathe, we are looking at similarity to the pulmonary embolus as an infrastructure. And on top of that, we develop our own predictive models to be able to address not use cases and solve the problems in not only in radiology, across all the healthcare departments. The first use case we want to introduce in the end of the presentation is impression prediction, which is a different model that we first focus on to be able to validate the performance of our model, which is actually generating the words for physicians as they do in their daily workflows. And Farooq is going to explain the other use cases that we are focusing on.
So in radiology, we can actually take a radiology report, we can take the findings of a report, and we can actually suggest the impression. And we'll try to show you that live in a demo. So we can actually generate that impression, and it matches word for word. We took that same platform, and we said, okay, what other use cases are there besides actually doing the impression? So the first ones in radiology were that we can actually automatically protocol. So if you take the clinical history of a patient, we can actually automatically suggest what the right protocol should be for an exam that's about to happen. We took the radiology report, we could actually structure it, right? So if you want to do analytics against a report, you can do that. But then we actually took the same platform outside radiology, and we applied it to something completely unrelated to radiology. We took a discharge note. So we found some data related to discharge notes, and we said, okay, people were trying to predict readmissions using the same infrastructure. We were able to predict readmissions with higher than 80% accuracy purely by using the notes alone. Right, so the point is, people were trying to do the same prediction using structured data. We only used the notes, and we got very high accuracy in that prediction. So the main emphasis here is that the platform, while it was built, using sort of a radiology as a first use case, it's broad enough, and that corpus that Utku described is broad enough that's applicable to other use cases as well. So today, our pricing model, and we've started with radiology, so it's on a per note, per report basis. There's a certain charge per report or per note. Depending upon the number of algorithms used, you charge less or more. We have shown that people are saving almost, or actually gaining productivity by at least 20%. And so, there's a productivity gain there. And then there's also a quality aspect. We're reducing errors, and that actually results in also benefits of another significant amount. So our market is about a $2 billion market, right? And that's across the sort of 4 areas: radiology, pathology, discharge, SOAP notes. The key aspect that I want to highlight in terms of what is different about us is that this is a platform that does not use any rules, right? So most of the other engines or platforms you'll see here are rules-based NLP engines. What we're doing is a platform that is using deep learning as the basis for the corpus as well as the actual algorithms, right? So there is no rule being defined. It's all sort of deep learning based. The success we've had so far, so we are partnered with the University of Chicago. That's where we've gotten a lot of the training data. For the radiology side, we are actually deployed at a practice which is using it for training new associates. We're presenting at RSNA with the University of Chicago our results. We've shown high accuracy. And actually last week, we were deployed at the Amazon Marketplace. Right? So our team, so myself, I'm an analytics person. Early stage roles in Informatica, MicroStrategy, used to run IBM's big data team through the Netezza acquisition. All right. Okay.
I'm sorry. I know that's rude, but we got to be fair.
Sure.
All right.
Okay, so.
Judges, go ahead.
So, who's your customer? Who buys this? And then I'm just sort of having a little time conceptualizing, what if I bought this, what do I get out of it?
Yeah, so let's look at radiology as the first use case, right? So in radiology, you have radiology practices that are trying to make sure that A, they are able to see more cases, and B, they're able to do that, making sure that quality is high. So they use the system to be able to improve productivity because you can actually to suggest the actual impression going into a report, so it cuts down the time they're spending on a report. And also from a quality perspective, we're making sure that any errors, laterality errors, which are very common in radiology, are taken out. So it's the radiology practice owner, right? In that case, if it's a small practice, in a large group, it's actually radiology groups sometimes own their own IT budget, so it's them, right? So at the University of Chicago, we're dealing with the radiology group itself.
In your radiology work, did you train it for general radiology, or did you do any subspecialties in this?
So it's across the board, right? So I can tell you that the protocoling work that we're doing, for example, our first use case is in CTs because that's it's CTs and MRIs where most of the protocoling is required. But generally, the impression work that we've done in the training we've done is across the board, across all modalities of radiology.
And where did you get the training data?
University of Chicago.
Yeah.
So we're partnered with the UFC. We have about 2 million radiology reports. We have an agreement with them on data sharing and collaboration.
Does that create any bias in your training data? Do you
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting you ask that question. So we actually trained on University of Chicago data for radiology. We tested on Indiana University data, right? So if you have time later on, we can show you a demo where actually we used Indiana University radiology reports and we looked at predictions for them. And so we're pretty accurate. Now, it's a fair question because stylistically things vary, right? Depending upon UFC may have a certain standard and other practices may not. So there is an element of tuning that we do, right? So for example, if we work with a radiology practice where the practitioner said, look, I always mention chronic illnesses in my report regardless, right? And somebody else may not do that. So there is an element of tuning that you can do on top, but the core message here is that we're taking information from text, right, and abstracting it. It is not some keyword matching that we're doing. We're actually learned it, and then we're actually producing those results for the benefit of the user.
So I want to add to that question because that's the main problem of AI-related deployments, generalizability, right? Our solutions should be deployable in all kind of institutions, including academic and private practitioners. In order to do that, for example, we use neural networks to be able to fine-tune the last layer for the needs of the customer, because they have their own language style. For some of the private practitioners like to add some additional impressions that we are generating, we're giving them. However, they like to use their own style to be able to exert in those reports. So we are fine-tuning it by using deep learning methodology. And the benefit of deep learning over the other traditional machine learnings are we don't have to deal with the feature selection, we don't have to deal with other things, so we are able to customize the solutions based on the institution.
So I'm very interested that you've explained adequately your technology, your technological approaches, and I think certainly this is a wave of the future. So very nice to be seeing it becoming a commercial product here. One of the problems with generative solutions that are used based on deep learning is that you sometimes get very unexpected results. If you look at any of the generative painting solutions or artistic solutions, much of it looks great. You say, well, paint me in the style of Van Gogh, and yes, 100 come out looking great, and then you get one that looks bizarre, and so can you speak a little bit about how do you handle the risks that you have non-deterministic generative text, and there will be outliers?
So let's first I don't think we talked about this. The University of Chicago actually validated some of our results, and what they found was that our impressions were more than 95% accurate in what they were predicting. But to your point, if it's garbage in, right, and we train it on garbage in, then is it going to produce garbage out, right? Being that you've got garbage trained data. The key is obviously about the volume, right? So the volume of data that we get, and that's why we made sure that the training data set was large enough, right? So it was about 2 million reports, and that in that case actually sufficed. So we have not seen a critical sort of you could say impression that was totally off yet in our results. Having said that, we are cautious about it. I mean, we were talking about it for example, in a protocoling case, what happens if we protocol incorrectly, right? And so the point is, protocoling is also a nice use case because most often if you actually ask radiologists, they get to spend very little time protocoling. So what we're offering them is much better than what they do right now. It's usually a rubber stamp that's going on, right? And so how can you make sure that it's even better? So we're choosing the use cases based on where we can have an impact and not necessarily create an adverse effect, if that makes sense.
I did have one more question, but okay. And that is, many products have been introduced in radiology and done reasonably well in radiology because radiology readings are highly stereotyped. Even the most, sort of fluid ones are very highly stereotyped. And so many things have been able to work in radiology, but did not generalize adequately to other scenarios, which are, in terms of formal complexity, they will be hundreds of times more complex on a mathematical scale. And so what does your business model look like if you have to focus almost exclusively in radiology? Will you still be a successful business?
Yeah, so we are, as you said, right? I mean, we've started with radiology. We have a core focus there. Our business model contains about, within radiology, contains about 8 different algorithms. We talked about one of them. It goes through the entire life cycle of how a radiology report is produced, all the way from prior to protocoling into the actual suggestions of lateralities, impressions. And so within radiology, there's enough of a market there, we believe, right? But having said that, we are very excited about the other use cases that are popping up, because every day we talk to people, people come up with some new use case that relates to text and unstructured data where we can apply our corpus and our infrastructure to. So we think there's enough opportunity in radiology, but we are looking outside as well.
I think we're running out of time, but could you just, I think I understand the kind of efficiency of an automated node. You also mentioned kind of improved quality.
Yes.
Where is that stemming from?
Yeah, so the quality, I think the average quality rate, the most conservative estimate is about 3%, right? So about 1 billion studies done, right? And that relates to about 30 million errors made per year in the US, right? So, and some of those errors are very basic errors. If we actually show you our trained data, we'll actually show you an example of a physician that actually called something out to be a left elbow issue when he actually was talking about the right elbow, right? And that's what made it to the impression. And very often these cases end up being in the operation room for the wrong reason, right?
How do you catch that?
So because our impression is able to correctly make sure that, from the findings section, that we are calling the right side of the body, right? So in that case, we actually called it the left elbow, whereas the physician, by mistake, wrote the right elbow in their conclusion. And the conclusion is the only part that they read, right? Referring physicians read.
Incidental findings as well.
Yep, thank you.
Big round of applause. Fantastic job. Amazing presentation. Good job, man. Good job. So it's amazing the things that people are doing, coming up with. And radiology is one of the first places that you see innovation happening. So it does not surprise me that's where you guys are going. So if you'll take some time and fill out the forms, some really great information we're getting. We appreciate it. I'm going to pull up our 5th presentation, Iris OB. And if you'll come on up here, it'd be great. Whoa. You're one of these. Full screen. Okay. I'm going to offline with the PDF. That's okay. So Jyoti, while the judges are deliberating, let's hear a little bit about you, where you're from, hometown, major in college, favorite color, favorite movie.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity, first of all. So my name is Jyoti Pathak.
This is not your presentation. This is just informal talk. It doesn't count into your time. So you can't really talk about your
favorite color, purple.
Okay, you can see it. I like purple too.
Favorite movie, Forrest Gump. Favorite hobby, cricket. So hopefully that helps.
Where'd you grow up, Jyoti?
I originally grew up in India.
Which part?
In eastern part of India. Maybe some of you have heard this town called Calcutta. It's about 13 million in population. And moved to this country back in 2002 and have been enjoying.
What's your favorite thing about coming to America?
Well, I have a lot of family here, so it was good to get, I guess, in some ways reunited.
Okay.
Secondly, I think it's been an amazing experience, both from a professional point of view as well as from learning more about different countries, learning more about the culture. So I think so far it's been really amazing.
So I'm going to ask the obvious question, which is you're talking about motherhood. You're obviously not a mother. So tell me why did you choose motherhood to?
Some of this is very personal. So our company is about postpartum depression.
Okay, hang on. I'm sorry. I've filled up too much time.
It's really an honor to present Iris OB Health to you. So we are a digital health company developing solutions for postpartum depression. I'm the founder of Iris. In addition to that, I'm also a faculty at Cornell University in New York. I'm professor of medical informatics and psychiatry. My lab sort of focuses on studying different range of mental health outcomes, and perhaps as many academic startups, this grew up as a research project with some of my colleagues in psychiatry, OB, informatics. Along the way, we have been fortunate to have a mentor who is a serial entrepreneur in helping us develop this as a business opportunity. Before actually I introduce Iris to you, I'd like to share rather an unfortunate story about a woman by the name Alison Goldstein, who was a fourth grade teacher in North Carolina. Lovely woman, great marriage, and unfortunately about 4 months after her first child was born, she ended up taking her life. And as it turns out that neither her husband nor her family nor her care providers were aware that she was suffering from severe postpartum depression. Perhaps some of you in the room could relate to someone like Allison, because out of about 6.4 million pregnancies in this country, 1 in every 5 women actually suffer from perinatal and mood anxiety disorders. So some latest data from CDC actually suggests that about 50% of these women are neither detected and as a result neither treated. And in fact, apart from pregnancy-related complications such as hemorrhage, postpartum depression is now the second leading cause of postpartum deaths. So some results, again from Mathematica research earlier this year, just suggested that untreated perinatal and mood and anxiety disorders cost upwards of $14 billion in healthcare expenditure. So on one hand, this is a very sombering news, but on the other hand, there is some good news as well. So first of all, I think, as perhaps some of you can again relate, there is much more robust public discourse about discussing issues like mental health. So there's a nice article that came out in New York Times earlier. Also earlier this year, the US Preventative Task Force actually made a level B recommendation for screening for perinatal depression for all women who are going through their pregnancy. And last but not the least, in March of 2019, Sage Therapeutics, a pharma company based out of Cambridge, got their very first drug approved called brexanolone for postpartum depression. So on one hand, we think these are really exciting opportunities and great news for people suffering from this condition. On the other hand, the current approaches which are used to actually diagnose and treat women are significantly ineffective. So it requires, for example, verbally checking in with your provider. It still requires women to fill paper-based questionnaires and self-report information. And in many cases, patients end up downloading apps from iTunes Store or Google Store to report their mood and behavioral symptoms. So none of these actually reduce stigma barriers. They do not enable comprehensive screening. And most importantly, they do not offer any timely interventions. So this is what we're trying to solve as part of IRIS, is to facilitate a digital health platform, develop a digital health platform that can enable early screening in a stigma-free environment, and furthermore, allow us to stratify high-risk patients such that timely intervention could be offered. Our solution comprises of 2 facets. So on the left-hand side of of the screen here is a clinician-facing element to it, and on the right-hand side is a patient-facing element to it. So for the clinician-facing element, where we are focusing right now with the minimum viable product, is to develop a proprietary machine learning-based suite of algorithms that can identify high-risk women from using data from electronic medical records, both structured and unstructured data. We have developed and validated this algorithm on approximately 11 million patients using data from several of New York City health systems. A provisional patent application has been filed. We actually published this paper earlier in MedInfo and presented this at the American Psychiatric Association annual meeting in April as well. And in fact, next week we are submitting a paper in JAMA Psychiatry to sort of talk more about this. Where we're going with this right now is to actually associate this propensity of risk with severity of risk such that appropriate guideline-based interventions and recommendations could be made, which would, for example, include things like more increased screening to all the more for high-risk patients to provide more specialized treatment. As far as IRIS for patients, our MVP right now is focused on developing a solution which will allow us to collect patient-reported outcomes. Some of you have heard about a screening instrument called the Edinburgh Postnatal Screening Instrument. So we are actually implementing this instrument and trying to incorporate this data back into the medical record, which is, by the way, a very non-trivial asset. In addition to that, we are trying to develop additional functionality such as patient-provider communication, peer-to-peer networking, telemedicine, and so on. Where we envision is to actually allow patients to adopt IRIS as early as their first trimester, such that we could onboard moms during their prenatal visits, in best case scenario, in worst case scenario, at least after delivery, such that continuous proactive engagement with moms could be enabled between the patient and the provider. In terms of our business model, we are envisioning this to be a SaaS-based system with shared revenue sharing. So we have been having some discussions with the COO and the CFO at Cornell. Just to give you some perspective here, and I acknowledge that these are estimates. So we had about roughly 18,000 plus deliveries in just one health system in New York last year. And based on CPT coding for in-network referral for ambulatory care visits as well as remote monitoring, we estimated about roughly $1,600 per patient in additional revenue, which amounts to approximately $30 million in just 1 year from CMS. And so the model that we're exploring right now with Cornell is to see how a shared savings model could be adopted. Okay, so that's our competitive positioning, and thank you. So yeah, that's pretty much. So what we're trying to do right now is, yeah, all right, great. Thank you. Yes.
So, nice presentation. Two related questions. One is, after you've detected someone at risk, does your program allow for monitoring and medication adjustment? And sort of related to that is, depression's just a huge issue in primary care. Right. It's underdetected. Patients don't want to be referred to psychiatrists. Have you explored just the general depression market and whether you could really help, broadly, because it's a huge national issue?
Right. No, I think great question. So far, I think our focus has been primarily on the OB and the psychiatry intersection. So looking at primarily at prenatal and postpartum depression. And yeah, so one of the things that we're doing right now is that Cornell gave us $75,000 as seed funding to actually conduct a pilot study and to do more patient and provider services to precisely understand some of these elements. So what we have discovered so far, and this is not published data, is that about 30% of women whom we identify as high risk actually do not want to seek treatment, either because of stigma or because of concerns that they might be breastfeeding and they don't want to get into any treatment. And so we're still conducting this pilot study as we speak.
One of your slides showed a number that said an accuracy of 0.95. I assume that means 95% accuracy. Accuracy usually refers to how close a measure conforms to a population, a known population measure or something of that sort. Could you explain what you mean by accuracy?
So perhaps the much better term should have been AUROC. So this slide over there, if you could see here, so in fact this is what we are trying to get published, is that we tried approximately about 7 different algorithms. These are all off-the-shelf algorithms in developing this postpartum depression risk prediction model. And what we've observed is that unlike perhaps what's been in the literature lately, is that deep learning methods significantly outperform a lot of the other traditional approaches. In our case, actually XGBoost performs significantly well. Now, our performance has been about close to 0.95, 0.96. Now, I think the bias here is that this is done only using data from academic medical centers. So we are trying to explore partnerships to try to see in a non-academic setting as well. So what I meant actually is the AUC.
Where is this being tested right now?
So at Weill Cornell and New York Presbyterian.
Do you have any other sites lined up for?
Yeah. So nothing signed as of yet, but we are having some discussions with Montefiore, also in New York City, and my previous employer at Mayo Clinic.
Can you talk a little bit more about the patient-reported outcomes part of the solution?
Sure.
Where you guys are exactly on that, and the most important part of that is engagement and the actual reporting of the outcomes.
Right.
How do you plan to kind of drive that in that part of the solution?
Yeah. So there are two, a great question actually. So there are two, I think, facets to it. So first of all, what are the types of information that we think patients would like to provide answers to and providers would benefit? So part of this is actually doing a qualitative study with about 50 women that we are trying to enroll and get a better perspective of it. So we're starting with EPDS, which is the screening instrument that has been tested and validated throughout many different, across the world actually. And so it includes issues about sleep and diet and fatigue and things like that. So we're trying to see if there are additional questions that we could potentially augment in addition to what EPDS is asking. So that's one of the things. The second thing, which I think it's a little bit more trickier, is to actually incorporate this information back into the medical record. And so right now we are an Epic shop, and we have been, again, having discussions with our own clinical IT team is to see what is the best way to facilitate that integration. So these are the things that we're exploring as part of the MVP.
And your the way of getting information from the patient other than just giving them the test? I mean, is there an ongoing texting? You
Right.
know, what type
So the MVP is just prescribing, if I could use the term, the mobile app solution. What we have not built the feature yet is to facilitate two-way communication between the patient and the provider within the app network. So that's one of the elements. In addition to that, our hospital was just given a gift of about $50 million to spend a lot of energy around telemedicine. So that's another discussions we are trying to have to facilitate more remote monitoring and provider interaction.
So you don't have, at this point, you don't...
Those features are not built yet in our solution, yeah. Not as part of the MVP.
Okay. It seems to me that's going to be a major piece of how well you can engage the patients and get some real data.
Exactly.
And also this awful statistic that 30% don't want to do anything, even if you find them. So.
And I mean, I think that's a rough statistic that of course varies depending on the patient background, their race and ethnicity. So there are a lot of elements around that. But in general, that's what we have observed, that a lot of women actually don't want to seek treatment.
So you've got data on the sensitivity and specificity of your work.
Sure.
When do you expect to have data around results tied to the fact you've identified the patients more accurately and you've actually implemented some intervention?
So that's where we are actually using the funding that Cornell gave us to actually launch the pilot study, which will be starting most likely January of next year, is to recruit, again, if you can see some of the results here, a slide here is to recruit about 150 to 200 women who would be going through pregnancy, and it's an 18-month study. And so sort of a usual randomized into an IRIS and a usual care arm. And our primary outcome is actually going to look at screening rates using EPDS. So how our instrument is actually, how our solution is actually facilitating more robust screening. And then things like mother's mental health and child-related outcomes would be secondary outcomes. So that's a study that we are about to launch in next year.
One of the things that I wonder is how is something like this really going to get paid for? How will the economics work out? The only really bright light I see there would be, since there are now drugs, at least one drug approved for treatment of postpartum depression, seems to me that pharmaceutical company has a very strong interest in seeing that people get the diagnosis and be offered their drug. Have you had any conversations with that company?
Fantastic question. We have had numerous conversations with them. So the form of treatment that's been approved right now is actually an IV infusion, brexanolone. That's a 60-hour infusion, and right now it costs $34,000. So it's a very, very expensive drug. So we've been discussing with Sage. They're actually testing, it's a phase 3 trial called Sage 217, which is a pill form, which is slightly less efficacious. So we're trying to establish some sort of a collaboration with Sage to see how can a part of our solution actually help identify patients who will be more eligible for their treatment. So the answer is absolutely yes.
All right, big round of applause for
Thank you.
Iris OB, and all of the teams. Really, it's very heartening to see such wonderful companies. So if you'll take a moment and finish your forms, and then if you'll find any of my MedStarter folks, put your hands up. Rob, John, any of those folks, they're going to come around. Please give them the forms, or just put them up here next to Barb and I. We're going to be doing the data, and we'll be announcing winners in a little bit. But I think everybody's a winner. So did everybody see something, at least one idea that they want to try, partner, maybe invest, get involved with? Anybody? Raise a hand. Anyone? Really? Nobody? Okay, good. That's pretty good. So yeah, we love seeing that. So now, one of the most interesting and engaging things that I've seen, Barbara is going to be telling you about their live invest elements. So I'm going to get that up on the screen while Barbara starts to talk to you about it.
While Alex is bringing up the screen about Live Invest, and first of all, did everybody get their AMIA money? AMIA Money of America, you should all have $10,000 to invest, because now it's your chance to be an investor. If you don't have your money, raise your hand, and Catherine, our banker, will come around and get it to you. Yes. But before we... I have a couple of announcements about some scholarship opportunities for all of you informatics innovators there. The first is an informatics scholarship at OHSU, and that's under Bill Hirsch's direction. So if you want any more information about that, you can either see me or talk to Dr. Hirsch, who's here, and you probably all know him. And the second is a fellowship in the STEAM program. It's a graduate program in entrepreneurship at the University of Notre Dame. So this is a brand new fellowship. And there's information in the back of the room, or if you want more information about that, I have some brochures up here. So we're happy to announce those good opportunities for helping you further your career in informatics. So now, on the money, we're having a break while we tally the results, and we want you all to go around and meet the innovators. They are all going to have a little bowl. And where are our teams? Are they in the back? Maybe if the teams will come up. No, because we're going to be up here with the judges. So the teams will be in the back. And you can invest your money all with one team. You can split it up among teams. It's up to you. And the amount of the team that gets the most of the AMIA dollars will win the People's Choice Awards. So there's a second award in addition to the normal Pitch IT award. So with that, we're going to break now and go and meet each other.
You want to say each of the pitch people should hold their own.
Projected revenue situation and help to break that down so that we can understand if one part of your strategy fails, what are you going to be left with? We found ourselves guessing and making stuff up as we discussed each of these companies because we didn't have a really good, we didn't believe some of the things that you thought were going to happen would really happen, first of all. And then we had to make up what the alternatives would be and try to give you the benefit of the doubt of where your market might really lie. So put a lot of focus on that because if there's no revenue, then there's no company. So for next year, just a thought.
So you all voted as well, and as investors, you differed from our investors. The People's Choice Award goes to Iris OB Health. So.
Let's take a picture. So guys, let's go take a picture with Iris. Even though we didn't vote for him, but we'll see after this. Come on.
And that's a wrap for this year. We're done. Thank you, everybody.